So today we're very honored and happy to have Rose Adkins Hulse from ScreenHits. As you probably already know, ScreenHits is the central hub of television streaming, a highly sophisticated and selective app which allows its users to discover a high volume of television content through streaming services, all put and collected in one place. So as ScreenHits founder and CEO and innovator and entrepreneur, Rose Adkins Hulse today will reflect on her experience working to streamline and revolutionize the increasingly fragmented and competitive field of home entertainment. Thank you. Over to you, Rose.
Thanks for having me. So I guess I'll just jump into it. You did a very good job explaining, Maya, what ScreenHits is. The company, I founded back in 2012. It started off as a business-to-business product, tech, that was to kind of connect all the content rights owners and distributors on a marketplace and to connect them with buyers, such as like a Netflix or a Sky looking to acquire content for their platform. And so back in 2012, we developed, without really knowing, an aggregator. And then as the market started to shift and change, we noticed that a lot of our customers were not selling as many of their rights internationally because they were pulling those rights back to create their own streaming platforms to compete with the Netflix, I guess you can say. And this started off with Disney Plus. And then we started to see that it was going to happen with HBO Max, with Warner, then with NBC, with Peacock, Paramount, with Paramount Plus, and it goes on and on and on. So about 2 years ago, we knew there was going to be this influx of 50 to 60 SVOD platforms from some of the biggest studios in the world. And we knew that this was going to be a game changer because people were so used to watching content, whether free to air or cable premium channels through their Sky here in the UK or through Time Warner Cable Comcast in the US. And they had no idea what was really coming because, you know, people kind of had their cable platforms and they always had Netflix as kind of like that blockbuster early release special kind of product that you wouldn't be able to find on a Sky. So when we heard this was happening, we thought, well, how can we kind of stay adaptable to the market? How can we address this change with our current technology and stay relevant? Because as the times change, sometimes your product can lose its relevancy. And so we decided that we would create this aggregator for the consumer and also for our core customers, because we knew they would be competing in a very competitive space. Because at the end of the day, a consumer is not going to have 20 different apps. And unless they start cord cutting their cable subscriptions, they're never going to really add more than 3 to 4 apps. So how could this be addressed? So the entertainment industry has been going through this whole kind of like, oh my gosh, we need to get our app out there. We need to develop this. And so everything kind of has been sped up. So during this process, when they were speeding up their streaming services, we made a few tweaks to ours and we completely pivoted and shifted our business to be consumer focused using our B2B technology, which was very streamlined, very easy to use. We had 8 years of testing it and we created ScreenHits. And what that is it literally is taking all these amazing streaming apps from the premium partners, so it's curated, combining it in a very easy to use system. So we use a traditional electronic programming guide, like a TV guide that you see on Sky right now. And then we also have a discovery tool, and it just makes the consumer more accessible to this great content without having to flick between one app and another to find out what's happening. So that's ScreenHits.
Excellent. And could you tell us a little bit more about your discovery tool? I know that that is an issue for quite a lot of the platforms, particularly especially when they move from territory to territory. So you want to sometimes highlight local content and you want to be able to, I don't know, search by different labels and tags. So how does ScreenHits help with that?
So there's 2 ways. So the first one, our TV guide, is actually, it helps in a lot of different ways from discovery. Because what's happening right now is somebody may have 3 different streaming services. Let's just say Netflix, Amazon, and Disney. But when they're on Netflix, they're only on Netflix. So they're searching within Netflix for something to watch. If they don't find something, then they have to flick through to another one, let's say Amazon Prime. They don't really find anything there. They're not sold on anything. And if they still have the patience to do it, they might open up their 3rd streaming app and a search on there. But this is taking up a lot of time because the consumer just wants to be able to go to one place and search across all their streaming apps. And so our TV Guide gives them a very quick glimpse into all the streaming apps they have, along with some free-to-air channels or AVOD platforms. And they're able to look across it and see, okay, that's interesting. That's what's trending across all of them. But if they still in that space haven't found anything, then they can move to our discovery tool. And our discovery tool is very similar to what you see on all the streaming apps. It's different carousels that are broken down to what's trending, what's recommended for you, what your friends recommend from you. But the unique thing about ScreenHits is that it's across all the platforms. So instead of just going on Netflix and seeing what's trending across Netflix, in that carousel, you'll see what's trending across all your 3 or 4 streaming services. Also, while Netflix has recently added this shared with function a few months ago, like we have, theirs is only for Netflix, but friends can share anything across any of the premium streaming services with their friends. And when they log on to ScreenHits, it's right there on their carousel on their Discover page. And that's very powerful because we all know that when we want to find something to watch, we dread the fact of having to open up different apps and to search for something. And it's just too overwhelming. So we get recommendations automatically from our friends, like, what are you watching? What's good? And so we've made that process a lot more streamlined and easier for people.
Thank you. And the recommendations which are not friend generated, where do they come from? Do they come from the platforms themselves, or do you have another algorithm? Do you sort of track engagement that users have on ScreenHits?
Yeah, so we have our technology for the past 8 years is always about recommending content to people that would acquire it and buy it. So we had to get it pretty close to accurate to just save time. And we're using that same algorithm. How we integrate it into the consumer, we're able to see what they're clicking on, what they're watching, what they're searching for, when they come back to watch something again, and across all their platforms. So it's not just what they watch on Netflix, it's what they watch across all of their streaming services and free-to-air channels and live TV. So it gives us a more in-depth look at what they would be interested in, and we're able to recommend it from different services. So as the system gets up to date with somebody's, search habits and viewing habits, then that becomes a more useful tool. Before then, you're going to be recommended, some of the biggest trending shows, out there across all the networks, and that gets fine-tuned the more you use it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And tell us a little bit more about how COVID has or hasn't affected your operations.
It's affected us like it's affected everybody else. I mean, some people were sick and they were out for weeks, some key people, which slowed down the process of getting us to launch. We also decided to not launch when we were going to back in May, because it was like kind of like the first lockdown of the country. There was more serious issues going on than us to capitalize on people being stuck at home. And even though it would have been a really great time to really get it out early to beta test it, I think that we wanted to make sure that our team was safe and secure and not stressing about it. And also to focus on what was more important for what was going on in our nation and the world at the time. So we came out a few months later. And then so our beta testing got it started a few months later, and everything kind of got delayed, but we feel that it was worth it. Now, outside of that, people have been stuck at home. So they have been acquiring more and more streaming services. And that's great for us, because if people just have one streaming service, there's no need for ScreenHits. But people have been cord cutting massively. And also because the majority of people have suffered financially, they are really looking at where can they cut? How can they save money? And one of them is when you're paying £80 a month or £100 a month for your Sky bill, you have to start to really think, could I get away with having great entertainment for £15 a month versus 80? And then, saving the other money or putting into things that matter more. And so that's happening a lot. And our platform that bundles, that's going to be bundling some of the leading premium packages together, that makes it more easy, or that makes it easier for people to cord cut and that transition to happen. And so that it's been very beneficial in that way.
And has it been easy to convince big platforms to work and collaborate with you? Because when we think of Netflix and Amazon and Disney, they're essentially in competition, but then you offer them the opportunity to bundle together in a package. So has that been interesting to sell to them? Or do you think that they're open to such negotiations?
Some yes, some no. The majority of them, they are all for the customer. This is the consumer. These are consumer brands. And while there's this business-to-business conversation of them working with this aggregator and how do they work alongside their competitors and how do they capture that attention of the consumer when there's so much noise around them? Because the reality is, if your customer is on Netflix, how do you even talk to them if they're looking for a show to watch right now, but they're on Netflix? How can you let them know that you also have a show that may be better or more suited for them? So they are all very much aware that they have to work with an aggregator to be able to reach the consumer. I don't think that no longer is a concern or issue. With companies like Netflix, they are the biggest, they've been around for many years. They're like the biggest company. They have a lot of subscribers. So, their target, their initiatives are very different than people that are just now launching streaming services, and they need to capture some of that market share. So those that need to capture that market share, that want to stay top of mind, they're going to be more open to bundling with other premium services, because it's all about getting that customer and keeping them happy and providing them that content. And those are the ones who are going to be the winners in this game, because as the consumers are switching and they're going off of cable, they're going to more VOD content, they have more control over when they watch something, which is the future. It's going to happen. And now that these studios get to build a direct relationship with their consumers, having these bundles, having that relationship is going to be a game changer. And those that don't want to jump on the bandwagon, they're just going to get left behind. So, I mean, if consumers can get Disney, Amazon Prime, Stars, Eurosport, ATP, BT Sports, the list goes on, for like $15.99 a month, or they can get Netflix for $9.99 a month. What are they going to do? They're going to go for the bundle, because they're going to think, oh my God, I get 8 different, platforms for this amount of money. And to be honest, most of the content I was watching once on this one streaming service is now on all these others. So that's going to start to be the marketing message out there for a lot of people, I think.
Thank you. And tell us a little bit more about the social functions. I know you've recently announced collaboration with Scenic. How does that work? What are your competitive advantages when you build something like this into ScreenHits?
Well, I think it came back down to some things that happened in COVID and people not being able to really watch TV with their friends or with their families because they couldn't go anywhere. And our lives have changed, and I don't think it's going to return to the way that it used to, because there's been so many technological advances with Zoom. Now, when somebody calls you for work and you have a meeting set up, you're going to always get a Zoom link, right? Before you would just get a phone call. Now you have to, have this, face-to-face kind of conversation, and that's going to stay a part of our lives even when COVID's gone. And I think it's the same with our platform. We wanted to partner with Scenic because we wanted to give people a chance to watch a show together with someone that they may not be able to see for whatever reason. And I don't think people will go out as much as they used to. Like right now, there's an influx of everybody just getting out of their house. But I think when those numbers start to rise again, people are just going to say, maybe I don't need to go out as much. Maybe I could still watch, Bridgerton at home with my friend, and then you have your tea or your wine and you're watching. And that was just a really important social feature that we thought needed to be a part of that, especially with sports. I mean, in our household, my husband's a big Arsenal fan, and he went to every single game, and that's not going to happen. So he's not going to be able to go to an Arsenal game with everyone shouting and screaming and being so vibrant when there's still a trace of this virus out in the world. But he could still gather with a lot of his friends, and instead of taking one friend with him, he can have 10 friends and be able to watch that at home and see all of his friends like on his tablet app or his phone and have them in the same room with him. I think that's going to be a very powerful part of our viewing future. And then also the shared functionality. I think it's very social, being able to easily tell your friends or share a show with your friends. And I think that's going to be the most popular feature that we have on ScreenHits.
So you are still rolling the app out, am I correct? Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So the main app has come out. The tablet iOS app came out 2 weeks ago. It has all the main features, but live TV is coming out in another week. And we have our casting feature, which is great. So you can use your phone, you can use your tablet to find something to watch, and you can either watch it on your tablet or you can press play and watch it on an Android TV with Chromecast or Fire Stick. So those are some really key things that are coming out. And then we're just adding a few more features over the next, I would say, 2 months to really just, enhance the platform as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. And one last question from me. I mean, I have lots more, but then I'll open it up for discussion with the rest of our guests as well. How do you see the future of film distribution and digital film distribution?
Well, I think that, I think for the next 10 years, people will still want to have that theatrical window. It's a huge marketing push. I think there's been a lot of research to show, primarily because there was so much marketing that went into push a theatrical release. People will still do that, but there's a lot of platforms globally that are launching films on their digital platforms, and it's working just as great. They're trying to figure out, do they charge £18 for that? Do they charge nothing for it? Is it part of their subscription? How does it work? How do you monetize it? How can they not lose that massive revenue stream that the cinemas brought in for many years? So there's that happening. Now, all the films that never made it to theatrical because there was such a limited window and they could only have so many films, it really affected a lot of the independent films that were maybe just as good, but they didn't have that marketing budget to really drive the crowds. I think that the independent film world will find their home on these digital platforms where they have a lot of control to reach their audience, to market to them digitally, which we have found out is a very successful way of advertising, because you could target exactly that customer in that right zip code to get their attention to want to watch or buy something. So that will become a very major part in film distribution where they go.
And do you allow for those premium films to be bought via the ScreenHits platform, or is that not a functionality yet?
We don't take anyone directly. They have to go to one of our partners. So ScreenHits works with about 50 of the top streaming services channels globally. We are very curated, so we don't have 500. That's great for us because we know that our partners are going to get their content seen and the consumers won't be overwhelmed with content. But if they are with one of our partners, let's say Stars Play or IndieFlix or somebody like that, then they get marketed and promoted on our platform in many different ways to our consumers. But people are always welcome to write to us, find out who our distribution partners are in key territories, and they can reach out to them to try to get them to pick that up. And people will still continue to acquire films. And one positive thing right now about film distribution is that the streaming services are desperate for content. Desperate. They can't make enough new content as fast as they need to. So if somebody's a writer or director right now and has an idea, I would be pitching to the digital platforms because they have lots of money and they desperately need content.
That's very good advice. Thank you. And opening it up to questions from the audience, Daniela.
Rose, thank you very much. This is fascinating. I have many questions. I'm going to try and do 3.
Okay.
Let's see if I can do that. And the first one is about your audiences. Have you got a profiling? You have what sort of information about your customers?
Yeah, so when we first started, we were pretty much a 50-50 split between men and women. But then we actually noticed when we went live with the tablet iOS app, it was actually more men. We had about 80% men, 20% women. The average age was between 35 to 60, higher bracket of income, primarily because if somebody has a lot of streaming services, they're going to be in a certain background. They're going to be a certain wealth background for that. So that was our big overall kind of number.
And what about sort of, I don't really know whether you have that already, but you were talking about some of the big platforms. I was just reading Sight and Sound that there's this really exciting sort of African and Asian platform. Can't really remember what it's called, which is just been, or it's been launched really recently. And I wonder whether you are looking for new platforms all the time, or whether you're quite happy to stick with the ones you were talking about, 50 that you have in your curated sort of portfolio.
Yeah, well, right now I would say that all of our major territories, we have between 8 to 20 platforms. We have it open up to add 20 to 30 more, and I think that's very much at, is this going to be right for our consumers? Is this going to be right for our partners? Is this a premium platform? We recently, we're about to announce, so I can't say the names, but we've signed on 3 of the biggest Indian streaming services to bring those SVOD platforms to our customers globally. So for those Indians living outside of India, there's over 35 million of them, and we'll be able to reach them. They'll be able to come on to ScreenHits, no matter where they are in the world, and access their country's biggest streaming services. So this is really exciting, and we plan to do this with some of the top streaming platforms in Spain, in Argentina, in Nigeria. And so it's very important because we can offer it and people can add it to their channels. And you never really got that before. If somebody really wanted to watch content from back home, it wasn't necessarily always available. And we can bring that to people.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that very well. And on a very personal note, because we often have students that come on these masterclasses and they really want to sort of work in the industry. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, what you did before this and how you got to where you are?
Yeah, I mean, well, I grew up in LA, California, so I was always surrounded by the big movie studios, and walking by anywhere and seeing them, on set with 90210 or something. And I was always fascinated with that world, and I wanted to be a part of it. So when I was in university, I did a lot of internships from DreamWorks and publishing houses that focused on media. That's really important. I also had a job, but I made sure that I also had an internship. And so when I finished university, I was able to get a job in publishing for a music magazine called Vibe. And then I moved on very quickly to a nonprofit organization that handled all the marketing for the big TV studios. So from CBS to NBC. And so I got to meet a lot of the marketing people. And so that kind of started my journey into working with these big studios and making my contact base. And I moved over to the Hollywood Reporter, which was even a bigger entry point. It was non-competitive, so I was able to get to know all the different production companies from Miramax to everything, and I kind of stayed on that trajectory. And then I went to Sundance Institute, where I really started to, even though I was raising money from the studios and bringing money in to fund the Institute, I got to meet a lot of the filmmakers. I got to work with a lot of the distribution companies that were partnering with us to be able to get access to the screenings, to buy the films, to make bids on the films. And I saw that whole distribution play out. And I really became fascinated with the buying and selling of content. And it was about in 2005 that happened, which changed the entire trajectory of my life. And then I went over to do distribution and partnerships for Universal Pictures, worked on some of the bigger films, and then left to move to Argentina to set up a co-production and distribution arm for a well-known animator down in the region, which eventually brought me back to Hollywood, where I worked for a famous producer named Ralph Farquhar, who produced Married with Children, The Real Husbands of Hollywood, The Parkers, Moesha, and I was his head of distribution and getting his content out, which was very niche, but internationally. And I noticed at that point, like it was like, this was probably back in 2008, 9, and I thought, my God, I can't believe we're still having to FedEx out these DVDs to people to kind of see if they want to buy a show or not, or get on a plane and go to Cannes for like 4 days as a small distribution company to sell 3 or 4 shows. It was just uneconomical for the majority of people. And the traditional sales agents that would not pay us anything, but they would take the rights to sell it for years, and they would give us a commission if they sold it. And we never saw anything, and it was held up with them. It was just an awful experience. And I just thought, isn't there some sort of platform online? Because every time you have an idea, you Google it, and there's always something out there. And so I said, there's got to be some online platform that we could just put up our shows that are available in a private space where buyers around the world can easily log on and see the screener, and we can start those sales conversations. But there was really nothing. And that's when I decided to kind of create ScreenHits. And so it kind of came from all those years of experiences working in the industry.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So going back to the idea of your users and your subscribers, Rose, you've been testing quite a lot before you launched. What type of feedback have you been receiving? How have you been sort of modeling your service to cater to audiences? Because in Brookes, we're very interested in audience research, so we're quite interested in their experiences of digital film viewing as well.
I think that some of the feedback we originally got was they wanted live TV. So we were not going to include live TV originally. We kind of felt like there was enough places for it. But we had a lot of requests for that because people wanted to actually have all their viewing in one place. Like, we were solving one pain point of how do you deal with, like, if you're having multiple subscription services, but another pain point was people having to flick through their Netflix or go to, find Freeview, where's Freeview, or go to their cable. And it was just so complicated. People don't want to have to keep exiting out of something and to go to something else. They just want to kind of be in one place where they can find everything. So we decided to integrate live TV, and we've signed up BBC, we have ITV, Channel 4, UK TV. So in all the different territories, we have the major free-to-air channels. But again, we cap it off at 50. You'd be surprised. In the UK alone, there's 860 channels. So I don't know how anyone even scrolls through all of those channels, and we find it's a complete waste of time. So we've decided 50 channels, and that's it. If you can't find something to watch in 50 channels, you would have stopped looking by then anyway.
Yeah, that's true. That's true enough. I can't imagine anyone going through more than that when they're looking for something to see right then and there. We have a question from Professor Paul MacDonald. What is the territorial coverage of ScreenHits? Can you elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah, so the goal is to be global. We launched in the UK and the United States first. At the end of June, we're going live in Argentina, Spain, and the DACH territories, so Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. Before the end of summer, so around September, we'll be going live in Canada and Australia, New Zealand. And then before the end of the year, December, we're launching hopefully in Nigeria, Italy and Spain, and Italy, France, and the Nordic region.
And am I correct in thinking that you will be looking for local collaborators in those territories as well?
We do. Like, for example, in Argentina, we're going to be working with Contar, which is like the local BBC streaming service. In Germany, which I can't announce because it's really big, we're working with like the #1 major company there. So it's, and the local SVOD platforms always take precedence in the lineup, and then it's like all the international ones. So we ensure that people that are looking for their local content and their streaming services is right there at the top.
Thank you. And who would you say are your main competitors? Because I've also been looking at, as you say, when you have an idea and you Google something and you look at what's out there, and I feel like in your sort of field of content aggregation, I suppose there's more cable TV and sort of big telecom type of organizations than purely internet-based aggregators. So who do you compete with?
I think ScreenHits kind of sits nicely in between everybody that's out there that's doing something. So you have your TV manufacturers such as Samsung, where they have Samsung Plus, and they have their own kind of like fast channels. So that's free to air advertising channels that are right there. They also have their free to air channels included. They have all these different SVOD apps that are kind of there. So they're trying to be an aggregator for content with their universal search, but it's the way that their UX is laid out. And because they let pretty much anyone in that follows their guidelines can create an app, it's a bit different. And also people can't take their Samsung TV out the house with them. So they need to have that hardware. And then you have devices like Roku, these set-top boxes. They're very big in the United States. But again, you need to have your set-top box, and they take everyone. It's like an umbrella for anyone that creates an app. There's no real curation for the moment, and it's just not the same because they, like I said, they take everyone. And you need to have your set-top box to watch Roku. Then you have your Amazon channels, and Amazon's trying to aggregate a number of different channels, a number of different SVOD platforms. The way that they've started out is that a lot of the partners have to upload their content through the Amazon Web Services platform. So when you are watching something, you click through on something on Amazon, most of it just plays right then within Amazon, and you can subscribe through Amazon. But if you want to go off, for example, and watch Starz outside of the Amazon experience, you can't do that. Now, I'm sure they're working on that because that's a flaw. If somebody subscribes to HeyYou or to Amazon, or not, sorry, to HeyYou or Starz, they should be able to watch that on the Starz website or on Amazon's website. But that's kind of where they're at. And they also create their own original programming. So, their focus is going to be really to push their own original programming to kind of keep control and not to have the customer cut off because of churn. And then there's obviously Apple's Must Watch. And they have a very similar strategy to our Discover page, where they highlight shows that are trending across all the different platforms. They recommend shows across the different platforms. But again, they have their own original programming. I think they've cut it off to 200 streaming services at this point. And they're going to kind of always push their programming through. And they don't have some of the bigger partners because of the 30% take that they receive when people have their app on their service. So I would say that ScreenHits kind of fits in nicely between those. And then one last thing, there are some TV guides out there where you can do a search and say, I want to watch this show, where is it playing? And these platforms for free will tell you, oh, you can watch that here, or you can watch that there. But that's more of a TV guide, I would imagine, and that the user experience is very different than ours.
Thank you. And I feel like we've covered the sort of economic and the technical side of things. But if I could move things over to, I suppose, ideology and politics, do you envision at some point ScreenHits having, or does it already have, a part of the interface that is reserved for social causes? We did start today's session reminding ourselves that today is the last day of the George Floyd trial going on right now. So I wonder whether you plan to have special curated programs or, I don't know, special announcements linked to social causes.
Yes, I mean, again, our platform is really led by our partners, so it depends on what sort of content that they have. But I know, for example, Stars, they do a lot with social causes. In the United States, they have Black History Month, which, to be honest, should be every month, not just 1 month. It should just be included in the regular curriculum. But they focus on some really amazing stories, from documentaries to films that focus on, civil rights movement and successes and achievements. And so working with a partner like Stars, we would be able to highlight some key political issues that were not, how could I say, controversial, but that were just people's right to have knowledge about certain things that I think are important that are left out. So.
And going back to functionality, do you have a children's function? You know, how you could switch the sort of what's accessible if you have young children at home that are just browsing the portal?
Yeah, so on the new tablet iOS app, there's a PIN code. So that's really a good question, Maya, because what happens right now is that people that have their smart TVs, and they have many different apps on there, if you put your child on to watch YouTube Kids or Disney Plus, they may get the remote control and accidentally or on purpose click Netflix. And maybe one of the parents was watching, El Chapo. That's the last thing you want your 6-year-old kid to actually, accidentally click on. And so we've introduced a child PIN. So when you're on a child's platform or profile within ScreenHits, you're only getting kids content from all those different platforms, and you can't switch out to go to your parents' profile to see adult content. So you're locked in at that point.
Yeah, that's very good, because yeah, exactly. You need that.
The only way to switch is to put the PIN code in to get into another platform to view content.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep, Daniela.
Sorry, I've just thought of a couple of things. One is about, I think that from a research perspective, obviously we're really desperate about the fact that Netflix, for example, does not release any data. So you can't really do research, or it's very, very difficult to get sort of access to the viewing data. And do you collect data of viewers, or is it something that stays within the platforms? Could you have access to what's happening through ScreenHits?
Yeah, we do have access, and we share that data with our partners directly.
Okay,
So they have access to knowing how how many consumers are watching. So one interesting data point is, for our B2B customers, I guess you could call them, how much time is my customer spending on my platform? So if somebody has 3 services, we won't tell them how much time they're technically spending specifically on other platforms. We will say, these customers have X amount of services.
Yeah.
Those that have 5 services are spending 10% of the time on your service, or they're spending 3% of the time on your service. If they have 2 services, what does that look like? are they, when they're doing a search, how many of your shows are coming up that they're clicking through to find out more information about, and how many are they watching, how many are they interested in? And this data just helps our partners when they're with their content creation, with how they market, how they target to customers. We get some really interesting data points because we know when people come onto our system, they upload, they integrate all their existing streaming services. We also see when they cut their streaming services, when they remove it from their portal. And so the biggest question is going to come down to churn. How do people retarget these customers when there's so much noise in the marketplace with so many great streaming services? When you lose a customer, how do you get them back? Because there are no ads on these SVOD platforms. So when somebody is in Disney Plus, they're in Disney Plus. You can't reach them. And you can do the traditional marketing, but the most important time to reach that customer is when they open up their platform, their streaming service, and they're looking for something to watch. That is the most important time to target them. So they know that you have a show in your database that they're going to want to watch. And so ScreenHits can do that because we can know if somebody decides to drop Netflix, for example, because they now have Disney and Stars and HBO Max in certain territories. It's not in the UK yet, but it is in the US. They're like, oh, well, we had that customer for 6 years. We don't have them anymore. How can we get them back? Well, Netflix may be coming out with a show in 4 months or 5 months that actually that customer they lost 5 months ago may be interested to rejoin if they could be targeted when they're looking for content to watch on ScreenHits. So they
would be targeted through you in a way.
Yeah.
That is very clever.
Yeah. So that's how we use data.
Okay, so you're doing many more things than just aggregating. You sort of, yeah, absolutely. Now, Rose, I cannot believe that you haven't got a project in the pipeline beyond all of this. Is there something else beyond ScreenHits that you're working on? Beyond obviously opening up to all these countries, which I'm sure is taking you, but is there something else that you're working on?
I have other passion projects that I do. I'm working on opening up something in Nigeria to help people code. I think that coders are really important and people just getting involved in technology. And I think in some countries, it needs to be introduced to people at a very young age to get them excited. And then we can help bring them on to our company or other companies. And it's a nonprofit that, Alex, my co-founder, and I, we really believe in, because we really struggled when we were trying to build a team of really great coders. And, you'd be surprised, but they're not a lot out there because everybody needs them. So that's something that we wanted to do to give back. And I support education. So in the Congo, I work with a company called Maleka that we help to fund different girls to go to school and get an education so they can do things like a private school education. So yeah, those are the things. But no, ScreenHits is my baby. And I'm really going to push that through for as long as I can.
Yeah.
If we say that with great power comes great responsibility, and bouncing back from Daniela's question on collecting user data, promoting certain services back after they've been dropped off, how do you sort of negotiate this relationship where you have so much data on your users and your customers, and then you have platforms who are vying for their attention? And we know we had the whole Facebook Cambridge Analytica issue where certain sponsored posts were going to certain people. And so I know it's a very tricky territory, but how do you negotiate that with ScreenHits?
Well, we don't sell our data. So again, I think because we're not selling our data, we're not, we can't be manipulated to use it in a way that we don't think is ethical. We work with our partners to help them to, eliminate churn. We don't share what their competitors are doing. We just help them to target. So we're just really specific and focused on that. So yes, I think that it's, I think one of the biggest problems is money is the root of all evil. And I think when you start selling some powerful data, then you could be manipulated by somebody saying, well, I'm paying you 10 million. This is what I want. Give it to me. And then you're kind of beholden to that. But when you don't, you're able to do things in a very fair and equitable way.
That's really good to know that, yeah, you've got that sort of barrier between the big streamers who just want your users and your data, and the sort of how you negotiate and how you curate the platform.
I mean, our customers, whatever's relevant for our customers is relevant for us. And the key for us is to bring content that we know our customers can watch. I mean, ideally, we want somebody to come on and within less than like 2 minutes, they find something to watch, because we've nailed it to the point where we know they're going to like this. It matches what they're going to like. What we don't want to do is to shove something down their face they really could care less about, and them having to constantly see it. It doesn't benefit the customer, and it doesn't benefit our content partner, because they're just wasting time and money targeting someone that's not going to be interested. If you have something that somebody wants, that is like the best solution all around, because no one's annoyed. And our motto in the office is, let's not annoy our customers. So how can we not do that? So everything we develop or come up with, is this going to annoy the customer, or is it going to benefit the customer? So that's how we go about things.
Yeah, and that leaves us back to the idea that the future is going to be highly personalized, highly curated. You would have platforms and algorithms recommending to you already what would be something that you're interested in. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I can see how ScreenHits is pioneering in that field. I would like to invite everyone else who is on this call to give a warm virtual round of applause to our speaker today, Rose, and just thank Rose very much for her time and for her expertise.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Rose. It was really good. Thank you very much for your time.